I think like the way that they are, the way that they're trying to redeem Sylvanas is abominably awful storytelling, because she's not being redeemed in a way. I mean, not redeemed. I mean, we don't know what happens, obviously, but it's like, you know, she becomes a complete soul. So it's like the Sylvanas post-cinematic is literally a different person. So, you know, what level of reasonable culpability does she have? It's like if, you know, if we just got somebody, you know, you use a weird tech machine to strip out almost all of the good bits of them, and then that person goes around murders somebody. It's like, that's obviously quite bad. Then, you know, you make a fully integrated person again. Are they responsible for the thing they did and they were messed up?
Well, they cheated. Like, they straight up cheated.
Yeah.
Because there's, like, there were two separate ways they could have went, which is Sylvanas does not get her soul back, and she's stuck, maybe, like, Zovaal destroys it or whatever else, and she's stuck being her, and she has to earn her path to redemption by herself, with the weight of all of her sins bearing down on her. She has to make those right. She must make those wrongs right somehow. God knows how you would actually do that.
But now a different version of Sylvanas is making up for the dickhead version of her.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So there's no...
They cheated. That would have been the way if it was destroyed.
Yeah.
But they took both. So she did make that last second change of mind. So we go, oh, well, maybe that Sylvanas wasn't all that bad. Yeah. And then they also gave her soul back. So it's kind of like they didn't trust us to believe she was redeemable, or to understand that she's redeemable with only one of the two happening. So they hit us with both. So that's what it feels like.
You basically, I mean, you had WoW developers basically masturbating to their own storyline, talking about genocide.
Oh yeah.
I mean, like, they literally said genocide at BlizzCon.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if you're doing that and you're like jumping into your, I don't know, weird fucking genocide waifu, it's like they're making Sylvanas do all these terrible things, and then they're trying to give a logical justification for the murdering of, like, I mean, I'm not the type to go around and be like, well, this is a bit problematic and weird, and I really hate how you could think about this in the context of the real world. But I think we have to acknowledge that, because the WoW developers themselves use the word genocide, and you do not use that word lightly. You don't. But now we have this weird murder waifu that I think the WoW team have got way more of a hard-on for than many of the players, especially now. And they've just done this weird thing to try to allow her to get away with Teldrassil. Yeah, not get away with. Yeah. I mean, she's left everybody else's justice, but the entire point is that I imagine that we're going to, you know, be sympathetic to her as she comes to terms with what she did, but that just feels so hollow when it's a different her coming to terms with what a different her did.
They're high on their own supply. That's the only way to put it. They love the narrative that they've designed for Sylvanas so much, like, especially in their own head, and they've written this book so they know how redeemable she is and how all of the suffering went through, especially with the idea of her being, you know, forced to serve under Arthas and forced to serve under the jailer ?
Yeah.
Which, you know, that's whether that's true or not. I guess we sort of don't
know. Well, they're
too
using
much,
the whole Sylvanas trauma angle to justify all this shit.
Yeah, so because of how cultural trends are generally moving, that's the kind of thing that people are super into in certain realms of the world. And that's the kind of thing where they will use that to explain away basically any wrong, because they have this idea of, like, they have the emotional track of Sylvanas in their head, and they're following that, and they're really, really engaged with it, and they've got the book all planned, they've got it all written out, but they're getting high on their own supply. They are so in love with Sylvanas that they don't understand why players disagree with, disagree with how things are being handled, disagree with her redemption, disagree with her as a character they enjoy. And it just feels like they are in their ivory tower, and they're looking at going, they don't like our character. Well, fuck them.
I used to like Sylvanas and Kata.
Yeah.
And, as time went on. But, I mean, really from BFA onwards in my head, she's just been a bit ruined, I think. It's like all the terrible things she's done for Zovaal. It's like, my God. Are you really going to make it that she is the savior of Azeroth because she did a genocide for all of these reasons that you've then went to, like, mechanically explain? I mean, that is such a batty way for the story to go. I I almost can't believe that like humans came up with this storyline, honestly. And then, I mean, you've got all the weird things like, you know, even Tyrande and the Night Warrior arc. It's like the Night Warrior things basically went nowhere. I mean, like, I know what happens in the rest of the campaign, but it seems like that was just an excuse to do some Elune and Cosmic, you know, exploration. But it's like, Tyrande's just felt like she's been stuck in a loop.
Yeah,
For ages. Like, they keep on doing this. Tyrande's really angry. Her control of her emotions. But it's like, Varian, Miss Pandaria. We kind of did that.
Also, Jaina with you know, what's the name for what happened in Dalaran? The Purge of Dalaran?
It's not even worth getting onto just how odd and tropey Blizzard are with their, you know, with the women of Warcraft sometimes.
Yeah.
At least I don't know. I feel that way, that they're.
I think it's definitely
tropey and
true
weird about it.
but they're kind of tropey with. I mean, they're tropey enough with male characters anyway. At least recently.
True, everyone's tropey.
Yeah, because at the minute, like, what's the arc for Anduin? He's following the footsteps of his father. Like, that's cool. That's something people relate to. But at the same time, it is like, well, you know, what do we do with the male character? Father dead, just fill his boots. What else we got? Like,
I'm a bit sad. I'm a bit tired of the whole like trauma, emotionally. You know, oh, she could snap at any moment because like Sylvanas, they just write her that she snaps at any moment. You know, Jaina and the Purge of Dalaran, and you know Tyrande and all of her stuff. I'm like, really? Is that where you're going, Blizzard? I thought you'd be more aware of things like this.
That's the thing.
I don't know.
They enjoy what they tell each other in the writing meetings too much. I think that's the only thing to me that can explain any of this.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's like the feedback loop's broken. Like there should be a tight feedback loop. You know, but between like how the story, you know, is just received, and you know that should, I think, modify the direction that things are, you know, going in, right? Because it's like, well, this is really not going. Okay, we'll try to move it in this direction, but you know, it's like that Garrosh thing. I actually think that a lot of the reason why people are praising the Garrosh thing is because he finally got to be done away with in a way that did not ruin his character. I think you probably could have done way more with Garrosh. It would have been great, but I think actually it's maybe that people just didn't trust them to carry Garrosh on.
That's the sentiment I saw. The sentiment I saw was Garrosh, he was a character he was, and then he managed to unsub before they wrecked him any further. It's literally, you know, he decided to unsub and leave scathing feedback. That's what his cinematic basically was.
that's pretty much it, yeah.
Yeah, but they like Garrosh in particular is just that's exactly it. It's the difference between Sylvanas' redemption and Garrosh, in that they kind of would have been similar but for different reasons. If Sylvanas had actually continued her path, if she had chosen a path and didn't double back on it every 45 seconds or whenever it looked a bit rough or reminded her of her trauma, whereas Garrosh is like, am I doing awful shit? Yeah, but my vision's true. I will have my Mountains of Skull and Rivers of Blood.
Yeah.
He still wanted those. He would do everything again, which means he is, you know, he's wrong, like, from a moral standpoint, of course, because he was a big racist and murdered everybody.
Yeah.
So he's not a good
Pretty bad.
So he's not a good person. People don't like Garrosh. People like that Garrosh had a character. He had something to stick to. It's like he was a good villain in that sense. Especially when you track back and see he was wronged, you know, in certain ways.
Yeah.
So his kind of trauma led him down a very wrong and dark path, but he fully believed in that path, making him a pretty good character. And even suffering for how many years in the afterlife, he's like, no, I'm still right. Whereas Sylvanas is like, oh, this might be not so good. I'm going to flip-flop.
So I guess another part of that, like, you know, the whole thing with Sylvanas, there is an angle here of like the whole abusive relationship angle, and that's the reason why she was blinded to the very obvious thing going on. You know, again, I'd be like, well, this is just a continuation of the very tropey treatment of certain characters in WoW. That's kind of boring, and also not really the way to take her, in my opinion. So, you know, you can sort of say that that's why she suddenly was like that. But, you know, literally the way that Blizzard portrayed it is that what triggered her was the word serve. But, like, she said the word serve herself to Anduin, like, a bit earlier. And I get it. Characters change between the cinematics. I mean, wow, what a surprise. It's not fucking defense. Get out of here. Like, I still do not think that the logic makes that much sense with how Sylvanas herself is portrayed. And I have read the novels.
That's a slam dunk I've ever heard.
It's like she is supposed to be very smart. She's supposed to be very good at, not stupidly trusting people. In fact, you could say that, it's that sort of thing. You could say that her traumas will lead her not to be trusting, but also give her a, specific blind spot. But at the same time, like, the first whole thrust of her sort of newer character arc was, kill Arthas, right? Get rid of the Lich King. Then she worked with the guy who made the Lich King. But the thing is that, like, we could understand that if we got to see that conversation between those two characters, where he maybe explained his argument, and she was like, okay, well, you look a bit weird, you certainly look evil, but you do make a good point. I join you. But because we never got to see that, we don't know how Sylvanas got to where she is. So we just can't really be in her level, I guess.
She's too smart for any of us to follow. She's so smart, she like horseshoes back around to being stupid. Because no matter how smart you are, what she did at the end of that cinematic by firing that arrow at his head, like that is a negative IQ move. That is so insanely stupid. Because it's like, if you were smart and suddenly decided to try to thwart him, you would do that in an intelligent way. Not, I will use a tiny part of your magic against you and this will work for some reason.
Yeah, but the way Blizzard writes all this shit is emotionally volatile woman.
Yeah. So she's like, I'm angry now. I will not do this. It's like, well, what did you expect to happen?
Yeah.
And then, unless they turn that out into like some sort of 23-dimension chess later on, and she actually betrayed Zovaal for a reason there to get her soul back then, and then they can mount an offensive and stop him at the sepulchre of the first ones.
For me, where it's just like, I don't know, their writing just seems so tropey. And, given that Blizzard is a very progressive company that thinks about all this stuff a lot, I'm surprised that they fall to such tropey writing. Well, it's really weird to me. I think it's fairly simple. They get lost in what they're doing so hard they don't see the trope. Like, it's almost like they go so hard away from the trope they loop back around to it, or they over explain it. So they're like, someone comes in and goes, fellas, people in the room, have you just written that Sylvanas is a woman who gets triggered by a previous traumatic event and then rebels and gets wrecked by it for it? And you're like, no, you don't understand. Here's the 400 million lines of internal Sylvanas like monologue that we have written that justifies it all. In a book you have to buy later.
In a book, I'm talking about like what they have in the office. They'll only send 5% of that to the press or to the printing press. The rest will just stay in the office forever. But it's all this stuff where they just don't like. I feel like they are incapable of seeing that because, like I said, they're so high on their own supply. They've got this really traumatic, interesting character that they've laid out in their heads, and that they're going to lay it in the book. But they don't care how that's seen by the World of Warcraft player base in general. And also, they don't actually look at it from a higher concept perspective. They don't take a step back and go, we were trying to go from A to B instead of A to C. But in drawing this squiggly, super incredible, interesting mega path all around the place to get to B, we've ended up at C. But we haven't been able to decipher our own big mess of convolution to see we've actually just, ridden our third volatile, angry woman in a row. Whoops.
Yeah, it's just like that thing of, similarly to how they're all, just characters getting corrupted. Everyone's getting corrupted all over the place.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's boring. Can we have enough of the corrupt? Yeah. So I don't know, man. It's very odd. Yeah. And I feel like, Blizzard have always struggled with aspects of narrative. But in the older eras of WoW, that stuff was like just driving the setting, and the setting was the focus, and they could tell cool little stories within the setting, and it was all very player experience driven, which would, feel great. But now it really feels like we're zeroing in on their story, and our story, as in, the players are experiencing it all, has, I think, fallen by the wayside a little bit. And, you know, that's... Yeah, it's just, honestly, it's disappointing.